All right, today we're diving into something a lot of us really love, shellfish. But it turns out there's a hidden danger that public health officials are getting more and more concerned about, something that can turn a fantastic meal into a serious medical emergency. So let's just get right to it with a pretty startling question. Could that plate of fresh clams or mussels you love so much, could it actually be deadly? I know, it sounds a little dramatic, but it's a question we really need to ask. And believe it or not, the answer is, unfortunately, a serious yes. Under certain conditions, these seemingly harmless bivalves can pack a potent, dangerous toxin. So, okay, let's break this down and understand what is really going on here. So first up, let's get a handle on the threat itself. What exactly are we talking about, and what does it actually do to the human body? The culprit here has a name: Paralytic Shellfish Poison, or PSP for short. Now, the key thing to understand is that the shellfish themselves don't create this poison. They're basically just unwitting carriers. They absorb it from the water around them, and it builds up in their tissues. So what happens if you eat shellfish that's been contaminated with PSP? Well, the symptoms can show up shockingly fast. We're talking minutes sometimes. It usually starts with a tingling or numbness, maybe on your lips or your fingertips. But it can escalate quickly to some really scary stuff, like muscle paralysis and even respiratory failure. And here's the bottom line: without immediate medical help, it can be fatal. Which, brings up a pretty big question. Where on earth does this poison even come from? So for this next part, let's unmask the microscopic source behind this whole thing. And here it is. The poison is actually produced by these tiny single-celled organisms called dinoflagellates. You see, shellfish are filter feeders. They're constantly taking in seawater to get food. So when these little toxin-producing organisms are in the water, the shellfish just ingest them, and the poison starts concentrating inside their bodies. Now, this problem can get really serious really fast. When the water conditions are just right, these dinoflagellates can multiply like crazy. This event is called a harmful algal bloom, but you've probably heard its more common name, a red tide. During one of these blooms, the toxin levels in the water just skyrocket, and the shellfish can become incredibly toxic in a very short amount of time. And this isn't just a random problem that happens everywhere. There are definite hotspots. These harmful blooms are most common along the Pacific coast and up in the Bay of Fundy region. So this is an especially critical issue for anyone who lives in or gets their seafood from those areas. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. No problem, I'll just make sure my shellfish is cooked really, really well. Well, this next section gets into what is probably the most unsettling fact about PSP. Right, so this is where things get really tricky. We're all taught that heat is our friend in the kitchen, that it kills bacteria and pathogens and makes food safe. But that rule just goes right out the window here. Cooking might kill off the usual suspects, but it does absolutely nothing to get rid of paralytic shellfish poison. The toxin is just incredibly stable and completely resistant to heat. Let that sink in for a minute. It means that all the normal ways we handle food to make it safe, they don't work. Whether the shellfish are fresh, steamed, frozen, or even canned, if the toxin is in there, it stays in there. It remains just as dangerous. After hearing all of that, it's pretty easy to feel a little nervous. But look, this isn't about giving up shellfish. This final section is all about what you can do. It's about giving you a defense, a game plan for how to eat safely. So it all comes down to prevention. And there are 3 really simple key steps. First, always pay attention to local health advisories about shellfish harvesting. If they say an area is closed, there's a good reason. Second, just don't go out and harvest wild shellfish yourself, especially in those areas we talked about. And third, and this is the big one for most of us, always buy your shellfish from reputable shops and suppliers, the ones who have to follow strict, regular testing rules. In the end, it really all comes down to this idea. The allure of fresh seafood must be balanced with an awareness of the potential risks. We absolutely can and should enjoy all the amazing seafood out there. We just have to do it with our eyes open, with a healthy respect for these risks. And that leads us to one last thought to leave you with. This whole issue connects to a much bigger conversation happening right now about our planet. We know these algal blooms are the source of the toxin, and there's a real concern that climate change could make these blooms happen more often. So as we look to the future, we have to wonder, is this invisible threat in our seafood going to become an even more common problem? It's definitely something we all need to keep an eye on.